All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code PODCAST5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Today's guest is James Maskell. He spent the last decade innovating at the cross-section of functional medicine and community. Originally trained in health economics, James is on a mission to flatten the curve of healthcare costs, building companies, and creating content along the way. He has authored 2 books, The Community Cure and The Evolution of Medicine, and he believes deeply in the power of the integrative medicine approach and the power of community to transform our health and improve our health outcomes. James has spoken to audiences on 6 continents and contributed to countless health publications. He lives in Sacramento with his wife and children, including Ruby, born just at the end of February. James, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been such a eye-opening experience to follow you on Instagram. And, you've authored 2 books, The Community Cure and The Evolution of Medicine. And I just feel like you have a grasp on what our healthcare system needs. So I'd love to learn a little bit about how your upbringing kind of brought you to healthcare and what you're doing in it right now.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. So, yeah, I was the weird kid at school that did natural medicine. I didn't realize that it was weird until I went to school and realized that no one knew what a chiropractor was. I was the only one who saw a homeopath. And, I was the only kid in school whose parents had to be called before I was given antibiotics. And so I was, as I made my way through life, I often ask myself, like, how did my mom, with no medical training, sort of see a future where there was a downside to the overuse of antibiotics in the 80s? And that always sat with me. I was like, how did she know? And what did she know that other people didn't? And how did she predict it? She does, that kind of thing. So that always stuck with me. I had a sort of a rebellious phase where I thought I needed to be an investment banker. And I did that for about a year out of university. I did a degree in health economics in England. And then through a combination of circumstances, I just realized I didn't want to be a banker. I really wanted to do something of value and merit. And I really just had a feeling that some sort of thing about the way that I was brought up, had some influence on what I had recognized through my education was what was driving, this massive explosion in healthcare costs, both in the UK where I grew up, which has, a single payer system where the government pays for everything. And here in America, where I was actually born, I was born in Colorado. And so ultimately, I just set off to try and find out what was going on. And I'm 16 years into it right now. I think the first 8 years was really about learning, about really understanding what was going on. And the last 8 years, I've been sort of putting my plan into action. And I think we're about to hit a really exciting inflection point in the plan. And, the goal is really to create a healthy society, to control the health costs and to flatten the curve. We're all very good at flattening the curve nowadays, flatten the curve of healthcare costs, because if we don't, our children will not have a future. It will bankrupt every country, especially America, which is already 20% of GDP. This is urgent.
Absolutely. So can we talk a little bit about those first 8 years and what were some of the things that you uncovered, other than the fact that our healthcare costs are going to bankrupt our country?
Yeah, absolutely. So that really came from my degree back in England. I came to America and I moved to rural Georgia, right? So it's not a classic move going from, I was the trading floor. I worked in London and I moved to rural Georgia and I worked in a clinic, and that clinic had a naturopathic doctor as the head of the clinic. I witnessed chronic disease reversal. Right? Not in one session, but in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, I worked there long enough to see people reverse a chronic illness, autoimmune disease, thyroid issues, type 2 diabetes. I saw a couple of people, like, the first time they came in, I had to push them up the ramp in the wheelchair, and 12 months later, they walk into the clinic. And I'm like, I don't think that many people know that this is happening or this is possible. And this was in, 2005, 2006. And so that was the first year and a half. And also in that time, I really started to understand how to run a clinic that was delivering natural medicine. It's very different from, this high-paced, everyone gets a drug primary care that we're used to. It takes a lot of time. The patient has to participate. There's education. And the clinic was really well run and was a great sort of learning experience. And, more than anything, I realized, like, no one knows this is going on. And if you look at the cost trajectory of one person who's on an autoimmune medication, if they're going to be on that medication for the next 20 years and it costs $5,000 a month, like some of the most popular autoimmune biologicals are, if you can get them off those biologicals, the cost savings are tremendous, right? For every year afterwards, because essentially their health costs almost go to nothing because they're just well and self-efficacious. Maybe they have to take some supplements. Maybe they're spending a little bit more on organic food, but ultimately it's nothing like the cost of being on an autoimmune biological for 50 years.
Absolutely. No, I think my undergrad, before I had my meltdown and decided to enter the healthcare space, was in finance. So I understand how much all of that can compound over time and really bankrupt our country. Can you talk about what that clinic was doing to help people get off biologics and what approach they were taking?
So the next phase of the journey was actually to work out, like, is this an anomaly or is this similar kind of a thing happening in all kinds of other clinics? Because it could just be there's this one guy that knows how to do it. And so that was the next sort of point in the thesis, was to sort of see, are there other people doing it like this? And I knew there were, but I wanted to find a way to learn. So I took a job selling for one of the supplement companies that was used in that office. So there's this, many of your listeners may know this, but there's this whole subculture of supplement companies that you could only buy through a health professional. You can't just buy in the store. So I went to work for one of those companies. My territory was Virginia to Maine. I moved up from Georgia. I moved first to Connecticut and then to New York with my then girlfriend, now wife. And I put 100,000 miles on my car in 3 years. And I went to meet every practitioner that this supplement line already sold to and, try and get lots more customers doing it. And honestly, that first 3 years was the most incredible education in the natural medicine industry, right? The professionally delivered natural medicine industry. So my clients were, in some cases, medical doctors, but at that time, mainly chiropractors, acupuncturists, naturopaths, dietitians, and all of them were doing certain things differently. They all sort of had different languages to describe what they did, but ultimately I would say they had a few things in common. One, diet was always a huge piece, and lifestyle more generally, more than diet, because there was always lifestyle recommendations for stress and sleep. there was always an effort for root cause resolution, trying to really understand what was driving the pathology rather than just the pathology itself. And then, all of them were sort of looking at the body as an integrated system. But I also saw that it was actually, very siloed as well. Like, these practitioners were all basically doing the same thing, but all called themselves different things and all had different words to describe what they were doing. And I saw that it was a very fractured community. So that was sort of my journey into really understanding, like, what is integrative medicine? What is naturopathic medicine? What is functional medicine? What is lifestyle medicine? What is regenerative medicine? And why do people use all these different names? And what is at the core of them? So being in sales and making 40 outbound calls a day and taking appointments and meeting doctors, that was sort of like the crash course in understanding what was happening already. And then, at the end of that was when I started to think, okay, well, what could I do that would be valuable to start to, to continue to learn?
I love it. There are so many people listening, I'm sure, who want root cause resolution. I love that you called it that. And they're searching for a functional MD, an integrative MD, a naturopathic doctor. I mean, you were feet on the ground. Can you kind of break down what each of these specialties really focuses on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, chiropractors are really trained in holism. They understand the body as an interconnected network. They focus on realignment of the spine and dealing with subluxations as a way of sort of fixing the nervous system. And then that has, effects throughout the body because the nervous system is really like the communication system. Naturopathic doctors are trained in the first 4 years is very similar to medical school. And then they go on to naturopathic medical school where they learn about, yes, drugs, but also, they focus on herbs and sort of lower therapies that are easier to use, less invasive therapies, I would say. So there's a range of therapies they learn. Obviously, acupuncture is its own discipline, but a lot of naturopathic doctors kind of learn acupuncture, and that's based in Chinese medicine. But then, you had dietitians, and then you had like rogue dietitians that had kind of left dietetics behind. They're some of my favorites.
Those are my people.
And then, and then the cool thing with medical doctors, right? So, you had some medical doctors, typically they would have to have had some defining moment in their career that made them leave conventional medicine behind. They came from all kinds of specialties, primary care, internal medicine, family medicine, but also you would find dermatologists and psychiatrists and others. But typically they either themselves or someone in their family had gotten so sick, they had to look for a different toolbox and had found clinical nutrition or had found supplementation and saw that it could make a big impact. And so now we're sort of charting their own path, but it was still very few at that time. And I would end up having calls with doctors who knew absolutely nothing about it, but like they had seen one of their patients get better. They were like, hey, what's this supplement? So it was really a fun time because I felt like I was feeling like the medical system like start to creak into evolution, right? We know that there's this other medicine going on. It seems to be that some people are reversing chronic illness with it, but we don't understand it. Where can we go for more information? And, that was the sort of the beginning of thinking, okay, well, could we like crank this up a bit, right? Could we make it easier? And what I identified then, I think that I'm really putting into words only now, was that what I recognized at that point was there was significant friction in that evolution, right? There's systemic friction, right? So these doctors have to, go to medical school and have this whole sunk cost. They're all trained in this one paradigm. Everyone has to use sort of like the insurance system, and that only sort of pays for one type of medicine. Then you have the doctor friction. They've had all this education, and then if they want to break free of it, they have to be an entrepreneur, and that's really hard. And never mind now that you have to sort of learn how to hire people and market yourself and those kind of things. And then there's patient friction, which is the biggest friction of all. I mean, we live in an unbelievably unhealthy environment every day. And breaking free of that unhealthy environment, like breaking free of think about all the things we do in America that are like done in community. It's typically all unbelievably unhealthy stuff, right? Pizza and beer night on Fridays, and we're drinking before the football game, and we're all eating fast food together, these are all cultural norms that don't just change overnight. And so there's so much friction to a change. And really the only people who can, overcome this friction are people I know Robin Berzin's been on the podcast before, but she said once that the only people who make it to functional medicine are the very rich, the very green, or the very sick. And I recognize that was true. Like those were really the only three people that were accessing this type of medicine at that time. And it was hard to access too, because no one knew what these words meant. And, people would just have to go off recommendations for friends. And so I saw, okay, there's a lot of potential here. And truthfully, seeing what I've seen, this should be the operating system for chronic disease care. And yet there's so many things standing in the way of it. So it was like, okay, well, let's just start chipping away.
Oh, I mean, it's resonating so deeply with me because I spent 8 years in cancer and genetics. 3 of those last years, I side hustled Be Well by Kelly, was going back to school and seeing clients. But working in cancer and genetics, it was like you had a radiation oncologist, you had a regular oncologist, you had a surgical oncologist, you had pathology, and you'd have to have a tumor board meeting so that they could all talk to each other about what the plan of care was, because they each were trained in a specific specialty that was so siloed that they had to get together to agree on treatment of a patient. And it was honestly like very inefficient.
Yeah, it is. Well, all of medicine is unbelievably inefficient. That's why it costs so much. And so, yeah, I completely agree. And, the problems there are problems in conventional medicine for sure, but there are also problems in the delivery of this medicine too. And I had to really think through, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? So one critical moment in my learning was there was this conference that you probably have been to because you live in the area. It's called the Integrated Health Symposium.
Yeah, I just took it on. I was just there virtually like a week or two ago.
I went every year from 2009 to 2019. I've retired. I'm never going back now, but because I live in California. But it was amazing. And a couple of things happened. One, the first time I heard Jeffrey Bland speak, who's the godfather of functional medicine, I was like, this seems like doctors are paying attention. Like I looked around the room and I knew these guys are MDs. And this is scientific enough to get them. Like, I feel like this has got a shot at, bringing them along educationally. And then I saw Christy Hughes speak, who's a naturopathic doctor who teaches functional medicine too. And I saw for the first time the functional medicine timeline and matrix. And for me, this is a way that functional medicine practitioners onboard people, or onboard patients, right? By going through their whole timeline, at really determining like where they are with their lifestyle behaviors. But this key part in the middle that really intrigued me was the 7 different systems of the body and how they break down over time. And what I recognized was that this system had the potential to be a common language for all of those providers who were all siloed and all had their own language. As an example, one of those 7 is structure and function. And so I was like, look, if you were at a clinic that had a doctor and a chiropractor, if you did an intake and it saw that your structure was off, you could then be referred to a chiropractor. Does everyone need a chiropractor? What it really appealed to me was the economist brain, which was really like, how do we maximize the marginal benefit of all of these interactions, right? If you line up 10 people with type 2 diabetes, like 5 people have type 2 diabetes out of those 10 because they've just been eating McDonald's for, 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? 3 of them have it because the stress of their job is just messing with their insulin sensitivity. And 2 of them, it's being driven by like some toxic insult, right? That's again, messing with the insulin pathways. If we change every one of those diets, right? If we give them all metformin, they're going to be managed forever. But if we all change all of their diets, 5 of them will react really well because ultimately it was kind of like diet driven. But these other 5, maybe not so much. But if you were able to bucket them into those buckets and prioritize treatment, accordingly, everyone gets better. And that was what I recognized is, okay, functional medicine's where it's at.
Because ultimately what we can do if we popularize functional medicine as the operating system, the naturopathic doctor, the acupuncturist, the chiropractor, the dietitian, the health coach can all be on the team. And we can start to build these teams of providers that are going to be necessary to reverse chronic illness at scale. So that was about 2011, 2012 that really sunk in for me.
Wow, it's powerful. I mean, just thinking about really being able to assess a client's need or a patient's need and what the root cause of disease is, and not farming them out, but really just a referral pattern. Have you seen this in practice? Like, what's the plan moving forward? Because I know we have MDs listening that may be considering a functional approach, that are finding and coming up against the friction you're talking about. Like, how do we get them over the hump?
So I'll just tell the last bit of the story, the last 5 years, I guess. So in 2014 and 2013, I was like, what we really need to do is to bring these practitioners together and talk about this concept that I have, which is really that functional medicine as a common language. And so we started a meetup for doctors who are interested in functional medicine called the Functional Forum. And we started it in February 2014. And we did a few things differently. One, we had a meetup and we put on a live show. And the goal was, could we make it like sexy and aspirational and cool to be a functional medicine doctor? That was the goal. Like, we wanted to put doctors on stage, not necessarily the old guard like Jeff Bland that were unbelievable, savants, but more like the average doctor who had made the journey already, and to put them on and say, hey, do you want to be like them? Like, come along and here's the path for you. So the first show was like a smash hit because no one knew who Kelly Brogan was. She was the fun person. I put her on and she was dynamite from the first session. We had Daft Punk as the intro music, and, suddenly and also we put it for free online with YouTube. And so everyone in the world could watch it rather than everyone who had to show up. And then the fourth ever episode was the first time that we got the live stream working. And on that episode, Mark Hyman came on and announced the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. And he hadn't announced it because he just flew in from Cleveland that day. And so suddenly, we had the hot show. And every month since then, even last night, I did a show, which was I think the 88th show. So we put on a show the first Monday of every month. And in the last 7 years, a lot happened. So first of all, we had, a year later, we had 30,000 doctors watching an episode of the show. We had 400 meetup groups at our height. So we had meetup groups of doctors in 6 continents getting together to watch the show. We'd have doctors in Manila in the Philippines at 8 in the morning watching the show when it was at 8 p.m. on Monday night in New York. We took the show all over the country. I did a 26-city bus tour in 2018. And, I wrote the first book, Evolution of Medicine, was really a book. The goal was, if I put this book in the hands of a conventional medicine doctor, at the end of it, would they think, oh, I want to do this? And that was the goal of that book. And so, we kind of reduced the friction all along, right? It was like, look, other doctors are doing it. It's not lame. This is cool. This is the place to be. This is the future of medicine. And also drawing on the sort of credibility of Silicon Valley that was actually working out really quickly that changing your diet and measuring it could reverse chronic disease. And we're seeing all kinds of startups that don't call themselves functional medicine, but ultimately are delivering that and becoming incredibly valuable. And then we also, look to technology, because what I had recognized early on and, I spoke about was that it was now possible to run a medical practice off a laptop in a co-working space. And if you want to see an example of that working, look at Parsley Health. I mean, Robin, her first 100 patients, that was in WeWork in Flatiron District. And now she's got this incredible empire, but it all came from her running a clinic off a laptop, prescribing the supplements, sending a mobile phlebotomist to your house. All of these things were now possible, telemedicine. And so that was the vision of the first book, was to help these doctors start what we called a community micro practice, which was a technology-driven, low-overhead practice where a doctor could quit their job or have a side hustle and start a functional medicine practice. And, through that journey, we put a functional medicine doctor in every city in America, small towns even, because one doctor got it and realized, okay, well, I could be the first guy in town doing this, and there's enough of a groundswell from people like yourself putting the word out think of how many books, Mark Hyman's had 13 New York Times bestsellers, Perlmutter, all these guys are putting information out. The medical system's so slow to change that there's been a significant advantage for doctors to put their hand up and say, well, I'll be the functional medicine doctor in my town. I'll go and do the training and I'll build a practice. So that kind of takes us up to, about 2018. I started an alternative to health insurance because I just realized that was kind of like a friction point, but I realized it was kind of limited because most people get their healthcare through their company and through insurance and through Medicare and Medicaid. And so about 2.5 years ago, when I went on that tour, I finally got to go to the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. And when I went there, I saw that they were doing functional medicine in a different way than I had seen it done. And I got really excited about it because suddenly I recognized that there was a model that was viable to become the standard of care. Because even though these doctors are doing amazing work in functional medicine, sitting with a doctor for an hour and a half is no kind of plan if we want to change medicine. There's not enough doctors, there's not enough hours, it's too clunky. And so I was looking always for a way, how could this actually, scale up? And when I went to the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, what I saw is that if you want to see Mark Hyman there or one of the other doctors, you have to go through a 10-week, 2-hour-a-week group program. And in that, it was run by PAs, dietitians, and health coaches. And in that 10 weeks, it was really like a training in how your body works and how to keep it working well. So they would focus on the foundations of health. They would do stuff on gut health. They would get into mindset stuff. And I realized, okay, this has got potential.
So powerful, because it's exactly what you're talking about. For functional medicine to work, a lot of times the functional MDs that I work with, it's $20,000 a year. It's $2,000 for just to see them, because they're taking 2 hours out of their day to look at your whole health history, to decide which, diagnostic tests and blood tests they're going to run, to really get a greater understanding of your body. But a lot of the issues can be addressed with food and lifestyle, just like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, it's critical. And look, the thing that I came to recognize, the biggest thing that determines whether people get better, if you look at a 5-year trajectory, do they do the healthy behaviors? You can't out-supplement the unhealthy lifestyle.
I think it's amazing that they were able to spend 10 weeks learning about their body, learning how to heal their body. It's almost like you're weeding out the people that really don't need to be there. They just needed a little education and empowerment to get out there and change their life.
Absolutely.
And then tell me how someone would filter to the top or filter up to Mark Hyman. What were those layers and levels above the foundation of education and taking care of ourselves, which I think we should have learned in high school, in elementary school. Where was this education in college?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so true. And I think so many people have come to that conclusion. And that's why so many functional medicine doctors want to write books or otherwise, because they're like, oh, this is so slow. And if I could just get the information out. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what happens at the Cleveland Clinic is half the people get better and never need to see the doctor, because that combination of community and dealing with, the biggest driver of all-cause mortality is loneliness, more than food, more than alcohol. And just think about all the money we put into public health for those issues, and loneliness is the biggest driver of all-cause mortality. And I saw some people make friends in week 1, some people make it in week 4, but everyone by week 9 has these new friendships. And I think that's what's driving the incredible outcomes. So after that trip, I just was so excited. I was like, I want to learn everything about group-delivered functional medicine, where it's happening, what it's doing. So in 2019, I started a podcast where I did a special series of 12 where I interviewed 12 of the leaders. And what I came to see was there was actually examples in every silo. And I just want to give one example for your audience, because I know they'll be really interested. So the biggest group program in America is called Centering Pregnancy. And Centering Pregnancy is basically just born out of the idea that never before in our history has there been a situation where women are expected to go through the birthing process in isolation. And so the very simple idea was, let's get everyone in a room together. as they're, going towards pregnancy and see, if we can infuse it with some health and see what happens. Well, preterm birth goes down by 35%. There's no intervention. They're just sitting in a circle for a few weeks, connecting about their experience and sharing back and forth. And it flattens the disparities between black births and white births too, significantly, because a lot of the black birth outcomes are driven by social stress that come from the social determinants of health. So that was an incredible learning. I also just learned about how in federally qualified healthcare centers, these groups were being used to actually solve these social determinants of health, that by putting poor people in rooms together, they were able to share resources and actually, support each other up. And this was like an empowerment method that I learned about. Then never mind, people might know Dean Ornish, who proved that you could reverse heart disease in groups. Jim Gordon goes to Kosovo and reduces PTSD by 80% with mindfulness-based stress reduction groups. So all of these groups, I just got so many incredible learnings from it. And also the most cumbersome parts of functional medicine, the intake, the lab testing, the behavior change, all of these things, doctors were innovating and doing them in groups and actually seeing that, patients loved it, they loved it, and the results were way better. So that's what led me to write the second book, The Community Cure. And where the first book, the goal was, look, if I put this book in the hands of any doctor, would they want to be a functional medicine doctor? The second book is, if I put this book in the hands of any healthcare administrator or any health professional, would they want to run these functional medicine groups? And that was the master plan coming into 2020, was I was just going to sell health systems on doing these functional medicine groups, just like the Cleveland Clinic. I got a really hot start. There's a Adventist Health is actually where I live in Sacramento. I knew the guy who was now the new chief medical officer, and I was like, we should do this. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And we were off to the races. And then COVID hit. And then it was like, oh man, people aren't going to be sitting in rooms together for a while. And there's a big flaw in the plan. And so we had to pivot. And that basically brings on to what I've been doing for the last year. And I will say that given what I know now, in some ways, I'm excited that this all happened, because I believe for the first time, we will have a completely frictionless system for true health delivery to become the standard of care. And that is because, one, telemedicine has become ubiquitous. Everyone not only can do it, but most people that I speak to prefer it. It's so abusive to sit in a waiting room with so many sick people waiting for hours, especially when you're a mom with kids, having to deal with the kids and take them down to the doctor's office. The fact that it pretty much starts on time and you don't have to leave your house, and there's not really that much value transfer from actually being there, never mind the fact that all the other sick people are there. If we learned anything in COVID, decentralization is really important when it comes to healthcare, because sending all the sick people to the same location, isn't necessarily the best idea when you have a contagious virus. So that journey led me to really understand, can we facilitate this same health transformation in virtual groups? And that was a project that we started last summer. We put together a 12-week episode of care to really focus on the lifestyle behavior changes. Could you get people to do an elimination diet in a group of friends? Identify who in your community is going to be supportive of your transformation, right? If you don't have people who are going to be supportive of your transformation, it can actually hinder your progress to share what you're doing with them, because they'll be like, don't change the diet, here, eat the pizza. You need support. Even things like SMART goals, right? This is obvious from people who have done any sort of coaching, but where in medicine are we setting SMART goals for our own health? And so, that journey led us first to learn how to deliver this, and saw exceptional outcomes again, people transforming before our very eyes. And then last year, at the end of last year, in the fall, we did our first pilot where we were like, could this be prescribed by a doctor and then delivered virtually by our team? And could it be a seamless experience for the patient? Because the thing about virtual care is you don't really know where that person is. You don't know, are they sitting in the room next to the doctor, or are they, in the next town just sitting at home in their underwear. You know. And so, again, it was a great success, and we found that insurance paid for it. And so at this moment, we're really excited to share that, we are now working with doctors all across the country, individual clinics, even some hospital systems coming on board to partner with a company called Heal Community and actually create these prescribable, insurance billable episodes of care that are built on giving people the foundation of health and actually doing it in a group environment that supports transformation. And so far, so good. I think we've got a real shot at really scaling the delivery of true health inside the payer system.
Oh, I love it so much because you can see it in communities. When someone wants to move their body and get strong, they join a gym like CrossFit. They find a group class that all their girlfriends are in their Pilates class. When they want to, level up in their business, they go to a symposium where they can learn how to be an entrepreneur. It's all about community. That's how we change. That's how we grow. I can tell you personally, when I'm working with clients and, a husband isn't on board with a food transformation or cleaning up the diet, or the wife isn't on board, or the kids all of that, what you're talking about, these friction points for change really are hurdles for people, and we need community to change. We need people to rally up together and support one another to do it. I love that you're getting reimbursed for this. I think if COVID has taught us anything, is that your baseline health determines your outcome. And it is just, it is hard when it's a little bit backwards, when we're looking at the education, continued education for traditional MDs being from pharmaceutical companies and their studies versus something like Heal Community. How can doctors who are listening in, or people who are listening in, request this from their doctor to join one of these programs?
Yeah, so right now, if you're a doctor, you can get in touch and we can have you prescribing this in as little as 30 days. So we're excited about that. We are working on like a faux pharmaceutical ad to encourage patients to tell their doctors about it. But ultimately, there's another layer of complexity to that we haven't quite got into yet. So, ultimately, that's going to be the way it's going to roll out. We've had for years, like in England, this is not allowed. But in America, this is allowed to say, hey, doc, can you prescribe me this? Like I saw it on the TV. It's crazy that that's allowed. However, people are used to doing that. And if we could get them to go to their doctors and say, hey, prescribe me this, this 12-week episode of care because I really want to start to do these healthy behaviors and I need a supportive community to do it, then, we're obviously heading in that direction. I don't know exactly when we'll get there, but so far, we're learning a lot from onboarding new clinics. We're learning a lot with working with the different payers, and we're also tracking the outcomes of every session. So we're actually seeing, like, do people get better? What leads to better outcomes? And, we hope that in the years to come, we'll become a leader in really group bioinformatics to really understand what is it about the group that facilitates the transformation? What is it about the messaging between members of the group that can facilitate the best outcomes? And, I know that people are very worried about, what technology can do in the future, but I can see an algorithm that's designed to help people get as well as possible, as quickly as possible, could do a lot of good, where perhaps algorithms have not done us a lot of good in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the 12-week program and how it's broken up? And I think because I'm sure people feel like, where do I even start? I mean, you open your computer, you get on the internet, and you get on a social media app, and you're like, my hormones are messed up, my gut's messed up, I need psychedelics, I have, there are so many things coming at you that I think a lot of times it's paralysis by analysis with people. And or they want to change too many things at one time, and they aren't using SMART goals. They aren't getting smart, and they aren't seeing real change. What's the difference in how you rolled out your 12-week program?
Well, what we saw right from the beginning is people get super easily overwhelmed, right? And so we need to take it slow. And so typically the first 4 weeks is really about, the first week is really understanding who in your community is going to be supportive of your change, meeting the other people in your group, really creating connection. We use the functionality of the breakout rooms. People get to be heard, to be listened to tell their story, to share without being interrupted, right? So that they're starting to really like share in a way that they possibly haven't been. Like the average doctor interrupts you after 11 seconds. So when have you had a chance to really like share your story, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is really to get clear about, you know, your timeline and how you got sick, right? This doesn't matter what condition you have. One of the cool things about functional medicine is doing this timeline where you understand, like, what are the antecedents? What are your triggers? You know, what are the things that are unique to you? You know, what happened? What was your parents' health like? What was your early childhood like? Like so many times we see, you know, people who have these gut issues forever, and they only just realized that they were on like 15 courses of antibiotics before they were 18 because they had these persistent ear infections. And now they don't understand why they can't digest anything. Yeah, is that you?
That's
Okay.
me, man.
Yeah, that's half the population.
C-section, formula baby, chronic
Totally.
sinus infections and ear infections that completely went away when I found out that I was celiac.
Amazing. So there you go. I mean, that journey to really understand yourself, right? That has to be there at the beginning. Smart goals have to be there at the beginning. Like, where do you want to be at the end of the 12 weeks? We work with Dallas Hartwig from Whole30, who really helped to bring some of his understanding of, you know, transformation and what it takes to really see results in a short period of time so that we could understand, you know, that and bring that into it. That's the first 4 weeks is really like, and that's the same for everyone. The second 4 weeks, we really focus on food because food really makes the biggest impact. And so, you know, for people who are sort of like immune, autoimmune, digestive, like that, you know, inflammation, we tend to look at doing an elimination diet where ultimately you're able to, like, you know, take out 7 of the most inflammatory foods out of the diet for a certain period of time and then add them in slowly and keep track in a journal of like how you feel and what happens. For some people, just to take that time, like they've never had an opportunity to do that. And this costs nothing. Like there's no fancy testing, there's no supplements. Like this is just a journey of your own self-discovery and giving yourself time to do that. In between those sessions, we're learning about sleep, we're learning about exercise. You know, the coaches that we work with will put on the 80s style headbands and do the workout, really focusing on functional movements. Like when I look at my family, like I have 80-year-old parents, like, you know, if they had just been squatting for the last 20 years, like a lot of the things that are coming up for them now wouldn't have been an issue, putting things above their heads. So we focus on functional movement. And then the last couple of weeks is really focusing in on how to keep this going in your community, what you need to be supportive ongoing. So we're always, you know, iterating on it. We have a metabolic program that's more focused on blood sugar stabilization, trying to avoid the high peaks and the low troughs that can drive all kinds of dysfunction down the road. We have a couple of people in the company who are super passionate about chronic pain. And it turns out that, you know, every chronic disease, this is what I want to share. And this is what I've said this to a number of people that I think just really encapsulates it. Chronic illness is biopsychosocial in nature, always, right? There is biological, psychological, and social aspects to any chronic disease. If we only use a biological input, we will never solve it. It's unsolvable in that pattern. It might go away for a while, the symptoms might go away, but it never truly gets solved. And that's why you need a biopsychosocial input. And this is, you know, this 12-week program in a community is a biopsychosocial input. One of the most amazing things that we've seen in the group is that we have diverse groups, right? As you just expect, these are just, you know, 17 people who happen to go to this one internal medicine doctor in Sacramento. And so, you know, there's racially diverse, there's economically diverse people in there. And, you know, at the end of last year, we did a session where we invited everyone who'd been in all the groups to come and just share their stories. There was some real healing that happened in those sessions. And this isn't like your Instagram healing. This is like real people having a transformational experience, being in the company of other people that they don't normally spend time with. You know, I've come to see in the last, you know, few months just how powerful, you know, the group dynamic is for, you know, trauma release, for, you know, all kinds of things. And what I'm really excited about is rolling this out into like a juvenile population, you know, that 13 to 18, that's really tricky for pretty much everyone. We're really excited about what we're seeing in the elder population. They know how to use Zoom. They know how to use their cell phone. It's, they can operate with the technology. So I think the sky's the limit really about what this is. And if I could just sort of contextualize what I think this will become, or what I intend for this to become, is a new layer of care that sits between people and their primary care doctor that's focused on health creation. And I think that there is if you can get that layer of care right, we can dry up how everything else goes into the rest of the system and actually bend the curve on healthcare costs.
Oh, you gave me the chills earlier, because what people are going through is so much more than what's going on in their biology. It is how they're thinking, how they're living, their, social struggles, all of it, economic struggles. Thank goodness for your work. What you're doing is really taking that overwhelm, that being interrupted in 11 seconds, that this is wrong with you and go fix it. When people leave their doctor's office, the compliance is not there. The overwhelm is there. They don't know where to start, and you're creating that bridge for them to be able to get to those goals.
I'm glad you said the word bridge, actually, because once we got our team on and we thought about who are we did a journey of self-discovery with all of our team to come up with these 10 principles of who we are and what we do. And in my first business, I did this exercise, and it started with we evolve. And then we had 10 things that we evolved. And in this business, I thought it was, we heal, or we didn't come up with it, but one of the coaches said we bridge. And ultimately that really resonated for everyone, because we have to bridge, people to their intentions, right? That's really what coaching is helping people, take action in light of their own intentions. We have to bridge medical paradigms. My first business partner, who I started the Functional Forum with, he passed away in 2019, really super tragically, basically because his conventional medicine, practitioners and the natural medicine communities had no way of communicating, had no common language at all to communicate. And it was really tragic. We have to bridge paradigms. We have to bridge, people. We have to bridge people into connecting with each other. We have to bridge diversity. We have to bridge technology. We have to make it easy for people to connect. So I'm glad you said the word bridge, because I feel like what's really missing for most people is a bridge. Like, people listen to this podcast, they get so much information, and their doctor doesn't know anything about it. And it's just so traumatizing to be not listened to, and to know that you have the solutions because you feel it in yourself, and not to be validated by the one profession that is here to, that is is given this role in society. And ultimately, these are people that care. These are people that want to heal, but ultimately the system is just, really messed up. And so ultimately I came to realize my first vision was like, we're just going to smash it down and start again. And ultimately what I had to realize is, look, if we want to help people today, we need to take advantage of essentially the payers that are already paying for healthcare. And that's what kind of led me, down the path that we are here today.
Well, it's interesting. And I mean, the fact that you've taken on this work and this massive vision of change, I applaud you for your effort, because most people would look at this and be like, oh, this is a really broken system and no one's going to be able to fix it. But the fact that you've taken the steps to build the community and build the team to be the bridge is amazing. And just looking at insurance payers, I can even just look at car insurance now. The innovation of car insurance is like, hey, put this thing in your car, and however many miles you drive, now you're paying on that. Or, the technology is allowing us to evolve, and it's allowing you to create these 12-week programs. But I'm so glad that the payers are paying, because ultimately they're going to pay less if people are healthy.
Yeah, that's the journey. Ultimately, we're tracking every outcome right now. Where we want to get very soon is to see, what did those people do? Did they go to the ER? Ultimately. So I'll tell you one project that I'm super excited about. If you want to imagine this at a meta level, right? Just imagine what it could do to your town. There's a town in England near where I grew up called Frome. And in Frome, a few years ago, they decided to see if they thought everyone was lonely. Could they get everyone into some sort of group? This has nothing to do with functional medicine. This was just could they identify all the groups that were already happening, and get everyone into some sort of group. It could be a Christian group, it could be a sports group, it could be a men's workshop, it could be yoga, whatever it is. Let's get everyone who's lonely into a group. 115,000 people in a whole town. They did it. They made a list of 2,000 groups. They whittled it down to 400 that met every week. And they had over 1,000 people in a town of 100,000 wear a green lanyard around to, and you could go up to them and they would connect you to the website where you could find a group. And it was a whole community effort. 20% reduction in visits to the ER, in that town compared to the rest of their county where it had gone up like 20%. That never happens. That has never happened. And so ultimately, by actually creating community, the downstream costs, when people go to the ER, that's where that's where the highest costs come from. And so, we intend to show initially that this reverses chronic illness and that this is more effective than a doctor's appointment or a series of doctor's appointments. And then secondly, we really want to showcase how much cost savings there is down the path. And medicine is almost gearing up for this, right? There's a shift towards value-based payments. So, it's just been like, again, there's a ton of friction to stop the system moving because the system is working really well right now. If you're a pharmaceutical company, if you're an insurance company, if you're a hospital system, like you've had a great year again and again and again every year. But, ultimately it is changing. And so we intend to be part of those value-based contracts and to be able to, be showing that group delivered care is way more efficient and effective and can be a new layer of care between patients and primary care.
James, I think you're doing God's work, if you ask me. This is good stuff. If people are listening in, what can they do right now to heal, change their life, level up, and really find their community?
It's never been easier to find people who are kind of like-minded, because of the internet. A simple thing that I've seen people do that costs nothing or very little that's really valuable. There are so many books. How many people have you had on your podcast that have a book of something to do? Right?
At least half.
Like a book club, a virtual book club. Like this is still COVID talking where you can't, have community, real community. I mean, that's ultimately what we need is people hugging each other.
Yeah.
While that's still semi-illegal,
Yeah.
let's talk about, like a virtual book club. You can read a book in a month. There's so many incredible books. And guess what? There's a book on every health topic, through the lens of naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine. So just committing to reading a book a month and then getting together once a month to discuss what you learn, what you're implementing, accountability, that's a great starting point. I mean, I know that most of the people that listen to this are women. I'm part of a men's group called Mankind Project. We meet every week. Now we've been doing it on Zoom for a year, but we used to meet, in person. It's free. It doesn't cost anything to anyone. And through that process, it's not even about health, but I've seen people's health in that group transform because it's about accountability. And, it's really about being accountable to a group of men. And I think that it's not quite the same for women, but I can definitely see there's, it can be adapted. But there's all kinds of people building community out there right now. And so I would say for anyone, it's like any healthy behavior that you want to do is not only easier to do if you do it in a group, but the effect of it is greater as well. And so that's a double, decrease in friction and a double increase in efficacy. So whatever your latest health thing that you want to do is, find a group of people that will do it together, use any kind of system online to create accountability and support, and just check in with people. I mean, ultimately, look at Alcoholics Anonymous. Why is it so successful? It's because it's free, it's completely, easy for people to get into, and it's valuable for the mentor and the mentee. That's another thing I can think of is if you're listening to this podcast, by and large, you're probably like ahead of the game when it comes to what's hot in nutrition and what really works. So maybe it's an opportunity for you to reach out and start community with people who need this, but maybe haven't quite made it yet. And that might be people at work, that might be people in your social circle. It's very validating, and you'll learn a lot, and you make true connections when you're working together towards a common goal.
I love it. Heal your community by building a community. James, thank you so much for being here. It was eye-opening to learn what you've discovered over a couple of decades almost. And I just can't thank you enough for your work. If there are doctors listening, we are going to link out Heal Community, the functional forums, all of James' books. If you guys are out there pounding your little drum of health and nutrition, start a free community, get your friends and family involved, decrease the friction, and let's heal the world.
That's right. Hey, Kelly, thank you. I just want to acknowledge you for, I've watched from afar, your star really start to shine. And I know that a lot of people listen to this and a lot of people really take your advice seriously. And I think that I've met, just like you said, the rogue dietitians amongst us are very special people, because you've had to really go above and beyond to, speak your truth and to create this amazing community. So I'm grateful to be here.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.